At this time, I would like to introduce you to your event MC. It is my privilege and my honor to introduce to you Dr. David Gusick. He is a professor for the FSU Graduate Art Therapy Program and project coordinator for the FSU Florida Department of Corrections Art Therapy in Prisons program. Dr. David Gusick has presented internationally and nationally on forensic art therapy and art therapy in forensic settings. Dr. Gusick has numerous books and publications. His recent book is titled The Frenzied Dance of Art and Violence, published by Oxford University Press. I brought a copy with me so you can see it. Later this week, it is my privilege to announce that Dr. Gusick will be honored by the American Art Therapy Association, where they will bestow upon him their highest award in the country, this year's Honorary Life Member, the HLM Award. And we are so honored to have you here. Thank you, Dr. Gusick.
I have to say I've been part of this project since 2005 when I was a lot taller, and it's amazing how this has evolved. And we learned so much. For example, before today I couldn't even spell MC, so I'm really? That was my best shot. All right, I'm done. I do want to speak a little bit about the two regimes, what this project is about, and then I'll begin to introduce everybody. So I'm very excited, very honored that I got asked to do this. So I appreciate this, and it's wonderful to see this room filled like this. The two regimes is a salvage collection almost lost to history, and I remember seeing it back in 2005, and what a rough shape it was in. So to see these pieces like this is just amazing. It's just beautiful. It is the life work of two Ukrainian women. Teodora Verbitskaya, who's 1900 to 1994, is an author, and her daughter, Nadia Verbitsky, 1922 to 2005, the artist of these wonderful pieces. And you can read some of these words around here. Teodora wrote about her family's life from 1927 to 1945 while living in Mariupol, Soviet Ukraine, under the two regimes of Stalin and Hitler. Daughter Nadia, who painted from memory with works created decades apart from her mother's writings, provides an intergenerational experience. Mother and daughter were survivors and witnesses of two genocides, the Holodomor, Ukrainian genocide, the man-made famine of 1932 and 1933 under Stalin, and the Holocaust, 1933 to 1945, under Hitler. The two regimes collection contains 118 paintings, 150 sketches, and a manuscript by Teodora Verbitskaya. And again, I urge you to please go around and absorb these works. These are the pieces that truly embrace the notion of both evidence and resistance. And they're just such remarkable works. I'm to be so honored to be able to be around them. Thank you. It is my honor to introduce you to the first speaker, Rabbi Shields, president of the Capital City Justice Ministry. Rabbi Shields is the co-president of the Capital City Justice Ministry, which is a diverse coalition of nearly 20 religious congregations across the Tallahassee, Florida area, who come together to answer the scriptural call to do justice by bringing together people to solve entrenched local community problems at their root. And for that, I thank you, Rabbi Shields. So please.
We take a moment for prayer or reflection. We give thanks for this gathering. We undertake the task of remembering and sharing painful but essential chapters of the human story. May we each find our resolve strengthened to fight oppression and genocide wherever it raises its evil head. I offer these words as a prayer to my God, my gracious Creator. Amen. Turn the other cheek, Christian scripture exhorts, when one encounters acts of hatred. Instead of fighting back in kind with violence, respond with love. Present love in the face of that hate. Dr. Martin Luther King employed this tactic, as did Gandhi, and this passive resistance was meant to awaken the slumbering moral conscience of society. But what if there is no moral conscience? What if the people are so oppressed they cannot act upon it? Turning the other cheek only works when people aren't as good as they ought to be and when the citizenry is fundamentally moral and open. Such an approach disregards the enormity of evil in the world, ignoring the fact that there are people and organizations that knowingly destroy human lives and families willfully and without apology. Hitler could not be shamed out of Auschwitz, and Stalin was not embarrassed by the Holodomor. Such evil necessitates a different response than turning the cheek. Scripture addresses the issue of real evil. And speaking of the Midianites, a tribe which attacked the stragglers and weak among the Israelite tribes, Scripture instructed, "Harass the Midianites, for they harass you." The Torah recognized, Scripture recognized the reality of human evil, the reality that some people delight in oppressing and putting others down. Such people cannot be won over through appeals to conscience or by showing one's own weakness. Rather, they can only be opposed with a greater force than they would have used to impose their own will on others. Most people are not evil. Many simply need to see firsthand and over a long period of time the consequences of their own bigotry, anger, greed, or ideology. But that predominance should not blind us to evil and its reality. We cannot let an unbalanced love blind us to truth. The example of the Midianites and the Scripture's insistence that evil must be exposed and opposed is the natural consequence of a passion for justice. Mercy and love are important ways to temper strict justice. But as a replacement for justice, mercy results in the suffering of the victim instead of the wicked. Scripture insists on balance, justice, an insistence that actions have consequences, requires that we oppose evil with sufficient force to prevent the wicked from harming the innocent yet again. And so we're gathered here. Confronting the bones of the past has taken on new urgency in recent months. Two regimes tells a true and powerful story of survival under those regimes of Stalin and Hitler. It also tells a story of many people sitting back, sitting idly by. Theodora's Christian family witnessed firsthand those atrocities, entire populations starved to death, forced to flee. The 7,500 Jews from Mariupol, many fled, but only to find their deaths at the hands of the Nazis in Soviet Ukraine in 1941. The love, faith, courage, strength, determination, intelligence of these women who faced the worst adversity should inspire us. This story should validate the lives of those Ukrainians, Jews, Greeks, and others whose lives were lost and whose voices were silenced. It should inspire us to do better than our ancestors did in protecting the innocent and the vulnerable. May we answer the call to create a more holy and just world through love, truth, and justice.
Beautiful. Thank you, Rabbi Schultz. One of the benefits of being up here again is that I get to be around such incredible people, and I look good just because I get to be around you, and for that I thank you. Which brings me to the next person. I wish to introduce Eric Clark, who's the Executive Director of the Foundation for Leon County Schools. This is a bit redundant to say this, but I'm going to say it anyway. It indicates that he has strong leadership skills. Well, if you are the Executive Director of the Foundation for Leon County Schools, well, that goes without saying. He has the proven ability to develop and implement effective development strategies, both short and long term. Two regimes has partnered with the foundation on numerous grants to help accomplish many educational goals, such as lesson plans, films, exhibitions, and now a musical. And I understand you will be dancing in that. Yes, I'm very excited to see that. I am not. Please.
Well, good morning, and thank all of you for being here today. We really appreciate it. I've been in this position for just about 3 years, and one of the first folks that I met was Mimi and Kelly. And if you've ever had the privilege of of working with those young ladies, you know that there is no slowing down, that once they put their foot to the pedal, you better either get on the train or get out of the way. And that's exactly what we did. We got on the train. We have been blessed to have been a part of this project. Our role has been basically just to help them identify and manage some grants that they were able to get. But this past year, we were able to do something that was really the first time we were able to do it, and that was to bring hundreds, if not thousands, of our young people from Leon County schools here to the Capitol, to this 22nd floor, to see this beautiful artwork. That is something that our students will remember for the rest of their lives. And it's something that, quite honestly, only students in Leon County schools had the privilege and the opportunity to be a part of. And that's something we're very proud of. With the lesson plans and the study guides and everything that has been developed, our teachers in Leon County schools have the opportunity to teach this history like no other teacher in the state of Florida. And that's something that our school division is very proud of. We're very blessed that we have a school division led by Superintendent Rocky Hanna that allows us to be involved in these type of projects. As we look to the future, as was said, there's a musical that's going to be produced and basically developed by the theater department at Godby High School in conjunction with Mimi and her wonderful team. Godby High School is one of our schools that does great things, like all of them do every day. They have a new auditorium that has just been refurbished, so this play musical will be one of the first productions that will be taking place in there, so we're very proud of that. In closing, one of the things that I would like to see happen, and it's funny how everything always goes back to money. You wish that it didn't, but it does. One of the things that I'm hoping to develop is to have a traveling mobile art trailer where we can take some of these, maybe not these art pieces of art, but others, to where we can get them to these schools, to where instead of us only being able to bring a handful of students here, the whole entire school would have an opportunity to view these wonderful pieces of art and to learn about the history. Not only that, but would it not be wonderful if this could be a traveling exhibit that we could share with our other school divisions throughout the state of Florida? So that is our long-term goal, and I have no doubt that with Kelly and Mimi pushing, that is something that we will most definitely have happen. And I look forward to that day to where we can reach not only hundreds and thousands of children, but hundreds of thousands of children. Thank you all.
What an amazing initiative. Thank you. That's incredible. The next person I wish to introduce was born and raised in Tallahassee. And Superintendent Rocky Hanna is a product of Leon County Schools. And if that isn't a vouch for Leon County Schools, I don't know what is. After high school, which was, never mind. He was commissioned as an officer in the United States Army from Marion Military College. As a newly commissioned officer in the United States Army, Lieutenant Rocky Hanna was named commander of the 160th Military Police Battalion Headquarters Detachment, making him one of the youngest unit commanders in the United States military, and why my son is so very scared of him. Foregoing a career in business, Rocky followed his heart and passion for helping kids and entered the field of education. Rocky served as a world history, American government, and economics teacher, an amazing combination. In the summer, we'll talk later. In the summer of 2005, Rocky realized a career dream when Superintendent Bill Monford named him principal of his alma mater, Leon High School, where he proudly served until 2012. Little known fact, he got rid of all of the teachers that put him in suspension. Really, it was very smart. Very good move. And this is why I have no friends. In 2016, Rocky was elected as superintendent of Leon County Schools and was reelected to that office in 2020, for that of which I'm quite grateful for. Thank you, Mr. Hanna.
Good morning, and thank you all for making me a part of this remembrance and this project. It certainly is a great honor. As you can see, out of respect for the Ukrainians who continue to fight now 90 years later against the oppression by Russian government and the potential takeover, we stand in solidarity with those Ukrainians each and every day as they continue to fight for their independence. So as was mentioned earlier, when I started my career, I taught world history and American history to students for a number of years before, as my wife, who's a teacher, said, I turned to the dark side and became a school administrator, foregoing the classroom. It wasn't because I didn't love the subject matter and love being a classroom teacher. Financially, it was just hard for us to survive on $15,000. So, but this morning just reminds me of the importance that our history plays and the importance of history education, not only for us, but more importantly for future generations. The genocide that occurred, it was a famine back in, a man-made famine led by the Soviet Union that killed millions of Jews and Ukrainians during this period of time. I want to echo what Eric Clark said, though. Mimi approached me when I was first elected superintendent about the Two Regimes project, and I had no idea what it was. And she was just like a bee, just circling around, circling. At every event, I'm like, oh, God, here comes Mimi again. And I'd kind of run to my car. She was, but Rocky. Thank you. So, Kelly, thank you. I mean, had it not been for you two ladies, this would never happen. And so how about a round of applause for Mimi and Kelly? And they mentioned about a film. I guess Doug Darlington is creating this film that will be produced for our children, and for our children to learn the history about the Holocaust and about this genocide, the Holodomor genocide, as well as other atrocities that took place well before they were born, to help ensure that those atrocities do not happen in the future. And that's why it just breaks my heart to see what's going on today. I mean, we're better than that. But until people have the courage to stand up to Putin and to stand up to Russian aggression, I fear for the worst. And there's probably, unfortunately, a mother and her daughter this morning that may actually be painting some art like this of the atrocities that are being committed today. And as human beings, we have to continue to stand up against tyrants and against those who wish to do harm to mankind. I'm just, again, proud to be a part of this event. Again, can't thank Mimi and Kelly and enough. You all could be in a million places right now, but you're not. You're here on the 22nd floor of the Capitol because you care. You care about the past, what happened to the past that we will not forget, and you care about the future. And I can't tell you how honored I am to be here and join you. We also, are currently, our teachers are under a lot of scrutiny as to what can be taught in their classes and what can't be taught, and that they do, the children shouldn't be made to feel guilty or bad or responsible for any of these atrocities that took place, whether those were in our country or other places around the world. That's nonsense. That's absolute nonsense. That our teachers now, every single thing that they say or everything that they teach, they have to be careful that it's just the truth. It's history. And if someone is made to feel guilty, who couldn't watch some of the things that we have done to other humans and not feel guilty? And not feel somewhat responsible. Maybe not personally, but as another human being, that we are all responsible for taking care of each other. And so I would ask that you continue to advocate on behalf of our teachers, in this case, our history teachers, who are not indoctrinating or influencing children. They're simply teaching them the history of the past so we don't repeat those lessons in the future. So again, Kelly and Mimi and everyone that had a part of this event, I would ask one thing, though, next time, Kelly, because we need to come back. We need to do this at least every year. Come back and do this every single year. Can I please, however, not follow the rabbi next time? Can I go ahead of the rabbi? But again, I thank you all for being here this morning, and I can assure you this is a priority for the 30,000 children that we teach, and Eric mentioned this before. We need to take this across the state and across the country because it is so powerful. I'm just, again, proud to be a part of it. Thank you, and God bless you.
Mr. Hanna, I didn't realize my level of respect can go any higher, and those words are just incredible. Thank you for the appeal for the teachers of the state and for all of us. Thank you. It is my pleasure now to introduce the first half of the dynamic duo. Kelly Bowen is the curator and co-owner of the Two Regimes collection. Kelly has worked with Mimi Shaw since the year 2000. Kelly has framed the paintings in the exhibition and has been coordinating the funding and the restoration of the paintings, and thus far has restored back to life 60 of the 118 paintings for future generations. It's incredible. Kelly wrote a reader's theater script for Two Regimes. A production of that script was filmed and produced by Doug Darlington of Winding Road Films Incorporated. That film is available to all educational institutions for free. How many times can we say that? That's incredible. A commercial film version was just completed and will soon be entered into worldwide film festivals. There's so much more I can say, and yet I won't. So I'd like to turn it over to Ms. Bowen.
Good morning. Two Regimes is the life's work of two Ukrainian women who told a true and powerful story about survival of the two regimes of Stalin and Hitler in Mariupol, Ukraine. When Mimi Shaw discovered Theodora's manuscript and the paintings of her daughter Nadia over 20 years ago, we did not know how this collection was going to develop or the international exposure it might gain. For the first 17 years, we concentrated on Holocaust education. The Holocaust of 1933 to 1945 was a genocide committed by the Nazis with the murder of 6 million Jews. Sadly, 1.2 million, or 1/5 of all those murdered, were Ukrainian Jews. Our journey took a turn on 2019 when we discovered Theodora's story also contained another genocide, that of the Holodomor. The Holodomor was Stalin's state-sponsored starvation of the Ukrainian people in 1932 to 1933, a genocide during peacetime. With this new knowledge, Mimi Shaw reached out to Yars Balan of the Canadian Institute of Ukrainian Studies, CIUS. He put us in touch with Marta Bazuk and Valentina Koruliv of the Holodomor Research and Education Consortium, HREC. Yars also, with the help of Yars, Valentina, and Marta, they helped educate us about the Holodomor so that we could educate others. Yars Balan also facilitated the publishing of Theodora's manuscript in Ukraine through the Zaporizhzhia National University. The professors there vetted this story through the KGB archives and the Mariupol archives, which sadly now have all been destroyed. Our journey took a turn again in February 5th, 2020, when we were thrilled to be contacted by Lucian Van Aller. Lucy is the granddaughter of the author Theodora. She is also the daughter of the artist Nadia. Lucy has been filling in many of the missing pieces of this collection. And since then, she has completed a translation of her grandmother's memoir. We are so excited about adding this book to our collection, and we are looking for a publisher. With the help of 3 Florida legislative grants and the wonderful support of the Foundation for Leon County Schools and the donation of 9 pieces of concentration-area music provided by Francesco Latoro of Italy, music that was created in the concentration camps, our educational film was launched in 2021. That film and its study guide is now available to all educational institutions for no charge. It has been requested from the United States, from Canada, and from Australia. Additionally, Peter Piasecki has provided a Ukrainian translation for us for open credits. Additionally, with the funding from CIUS and HREC, Doug Darlington of Winding Roads Films has completed a commercial film of 2 regimes, 2 genocides. We are in the process of submitting this into film festivals. Through the years, we've been so blessed to work with many incredible people. Our restoration artist, Lieutenant Colonel Michael Hall, has restored 60 of the 118 paintings in this collection. And with the donation of all these beautiful repurposed frames donated by Goodwill Industries Big Ben, this exhibition of 2 regimes about Mariupol, Ukraine, can now reach larger museums and larger audiences. Those who view this exhibition are touched, especially students, in an incredible way. We have been, 2 regimes has just been a passion for myself and Mimi over the past 20 years, but we did not do it alone. Well over 150 people have donated their time, their talent, and their treasure to help us get, and 2 regimes get to where it is today. This story reaches people on many different levels, and the world needs to learn about this story. And with your help, it will. Thank you.
It is my pleasure to introduce a gentleman that I've met a handful of times, and each time has become more and more special. An amazing person to get to know. Douglas Darlington is an accomplished producer, director, writer, and editor in film. Unfortunately, he will not be able to speak tonight. But you know, but you should still let me tell this story. Let me tell you about Mr. Darlington, the gentleman behind the curtain. Never mind the person behind the curtain. The great and powerful Douglas Darlington is an accomplished producer. I could say anything then, right? Director, writer, and editor in film, broadcast, and corporate production. Doug runs a full-service production company and manages and directs 50-person crews for video productions and live events, and yet he's still the main person behind the camera. Doug plans to develop, produce, document, and distribute the story of the 2 Regimes collection through the 2-hour documentary and a documentary series about these 2 women. Doug is here, would have been, but will later. I'm sure you can all corner him, because I'm sure he'll be happy to tell you about his latest film. I know I want to hear more about it. It's just incredible. That brings me to, this is an incredible honor to be able to do this. I get to introduce Lucian Venelor from West Virginia. Lucian is the daughter of the artist Nadia Verbitsky. So it's just such an honor to meet you and to meet the daughter of this wonderful artist. These are the paintings all around you. Lucy is also the granddaughter of the author, Theodora Verbitskaya, who wrote the words and the text passages for the paintings. In 2021, Lucy completed the translation of her grandmother's memoir with almost 100 footnotes and annotations. It's incredible. Here is Lucy to tell you more of her family story.
Thank you all for coming. Thank you for allowing me the honor of participating in the Two Regimes presentation today and the exhibitions, the educational projects that Mimi and Kelly have put together. And Doug, thank you for all the work, the organizations who have made this possible. This is so much larger than my family ever thought that it would be. We never expected such a response and such prominence for this story and these paintings. These are the paintings that stared at me from the walls of our homes for my entire childhood and adolescence till I left home. These are the stories that were my bedtime stories. These, I watched my grandmother write from my earliest memories. She raised me, and so these were the stories that were told day in and day out to me and to my sister. It's very important, especially now, that these stories are told to the world, because not only is the history of Mariupol being wiped out by the Russians again, and the Holodomor killed so many people, countless people. This was every Ukrainian's story. This was not just my family's story. But now there's a thing that is being called, Professor Mutil of Rutgers University wrote a great article, and he said that there is a new genocide being orchestrated in Ukraine now called the Holodomor. Holodomor is from the root word cholod, which is golod, which is hunger. But cholod is cold, freezing. And so with the bombing and the destruction of all the infrastructure in Ukraine now that provides heat, that provides electricity, there is the danger of the Holodomor, or death of millions by freezing. So it's vital that this story be told, because these events are once again repeating straight out of Stalin's playbook, straight out of Hitler's playbook, with really very few changes. The weapons are now more advanced, but that is the only difference, really. So my son, when I was preparing to come here, my son said, "Mom, do you have notes?" And I said, "Child, I could speak on this for hours and days and months and years." And so I'll try to encapsulate in just a few minutes what my grandmother was like, what my mother was like. My grandmother, Theodora Yefremovna Yashkina was her maiden name, was born in a tiny village in northeast Ukraine called Hrunivka in Sumska Oblast. And she was the daughter of the village blacksmith, and her mother was the village herbalist, where she was an educated woman, could read and write. And so all of the people who were sick in the village came to my great-grandmother to be healed, for advice. She made clothing for them, a very generous lady. And so my grandmother helped her and learned the herbal remedies and learned how to give to people who needed help. So in that region, and in the village where my great-grandmother was from, those villagers passed between Russian and Ukrainian hands. They were originally Ukrainian, but then depending on the different royal families who gave villages and lands to different nobles as gifts or as boons or as rewards, it passed in between Ukraine and Russia. And the peasants of the villages for hundreds of years were oppressed. There was a decree, several royal decrees, that created what we call Russianization, where the Ukrainian language was forbidden, Ukrainian culture was wiped out, forbidden, became illegal. Now, they let us keep the singing and the dancing, because in that way, the powers that be could say, see, yes, we have allowed you to keep your culture. But there was great oppression, and many of the peasants, most of the peasants of that time, of my great-grandmother's time and before, were serfs. They were slaves. They had no rights. They were chained. They were called krepostnie, which comes from the root word krepость, which is fortress. So they were chained, sometimes literally and definitely figuratively, to the lands that they were bound to. They were owned either by nobles, different noble families, entire regions, and all of the people on there. And they were owned by the church, and they were owned by industry, either the mining companies. I mean, maybe you've seen the paintings of the Volga boatmen, where the men are pulling the barge up the river. Those were krepostnie, those were serfs who had to pull that boat up and down the river until they died. And they could be bought and sold. They had no rights. Families were split up, much like the slavery here on this continent. And so even after the Russian decree in 1861, where they were freed, they still were extremely, extremely oppressed. And so my great-grandmother and my great-grandfather were two of the people, trudoviki, who were fighting for equal rights for the freed serfs. So my grandmother, Theodora, grew up with a sense of fairness, with a sense of generosity, with a sense of that the government was oppressive. And so she also knew how government changed the narrative with the selective retelling of and changing of history. So maybe that was why she felt compelled to write the story that she witnessed. They moved to Mariupol when my mother was 6 years old. They had been running from an arrest. My grandfather had said something very silly during a card game in the middle of the night. He called the government, the Soviet government, dolgonosiki, which are a type of grain-boring weevil, kind of like boll weevils, and so they would eat the heart of the grain and kill all the grain. So he said that dolgonosiki have seated themselves in the Kremlin, which meant that the government was sucking all of the lifeblood out of the populace. So then someone reported him, and they came to get him in the middle of the night. So he was arrested, and then he was supposed to turn himself in to be sent to Gulag, but since they hadn't put any guards on the apartment where they lived, he jumped out the window and ran to the train station. At that time, they lived on another border area, the town of Milove and the town of Chertkovo, where my mother was born, was a train station where one door opened into Ukraine and the other door opened into Russia. And so he hopped the train and he escaped. So then my grandmother followed him later, and then they ended up in Mariupol, where he was looking for work. He did not find work in Mariupol. He got arrested instead, because the minute he had to go enroll to go to work, they reminded him, his name was on a list, they reminded him, they arrested him, and he got sent to Gulag for 6 years. So my grandmother was a single mother during the Holodomor, a single mother of 2 daughters. And so this memoir is written from the perspective, as far as I have been told, it is the only written memoir by a woman written outside of the Soviet Union. Therefore, it's an uncensored memoir. And as Kelly mentioned, the facts have been vetted. It is the only memoir, eyewitness account, written by a mother. It doesn't list amounts of tanks. It doesn't list troop movements. It lists a mother trying to protect her daughters and preserve their lives. and all of the things that occurred. So, as I mentioned, the border towns where the family lived were Russified. And so my grandmother, being a school teacher, being an educated woman, was teaching the enforced Russian language. And so I learned, not Ukrainian, I learned Imperial Russian. She taught me to read and write. She taught me every good thing that I know. She taught me what all Ukrainian country girls learn: cooking, embroidery, sewing, knitting, crocheting, all kinds of crafts. She remembered when Azovstal was not built yet. It wasn't built till 1930. She described the field of flowers that it used to be and taught me how to weave vinki, the wreaths that Ukrainian girls wear on their heads, in the same way. So she wrote incessantly. She was compelled. This is a burden that she carried. She wrote and told about it every single day. And there were many days when I remember she would cry, and I would say, "Babusa, why are you crying?" And she would tell me either about her mother, who died when she was young, and sometimes she would tell me about my aunt, who also died as a result of being poisoned. She developed cancer after the Nazi concentration camps and working with the toxic chemicals there. Sometimes she would tell me the details of the stories that she was writing about. And so we would cry together, and then she would take me into the kitchen and we would cook something, or, continue with daily life. But these stories and these paintings were a part of every single day. Now, my mother couldn't speak about what she experienced. She was a child during that time. She was traumatized. They had to run, they had to hide, they couldn't speak. Nothing serious was spoken about at home, because if a child accidentally said something, then the family would be wiped out, would be arrested, maybe shot. And so my mother didn't speak. She painted. Her way of communicating was through painting. And so she painted like a madwoman every day. And so she taught me to draw and paint before I could even walk and talk. I was in the high chair. She gave me watercolors that I could paint and eat. And we painted everywhere that we went. Every weekend we would go somewhere. We would either be out in nature or we would go to a museum. I was taken to every major museum in all of Europe, palaces, castles, and we would set up our easels. Sometimes in the museums we would set up and our easels next to a bench, and we would copy great masters' paintings. And she was really the best art teacher that one could possibly have. So then we came to me, the child of refugees, traumatized by Holodomor, by Holocaust. And like the children of all refugees everywhere, I'm sure, we just tried to have a normal life. We tried to be normal American kids. We didn't focus on our Ukrainian culture. We wanted to wear jeans. We didn't want to wear embroidered shirts. And so I tried to avoid it. I tried to get away from this family story. My grandmother asked me to translate her work 45 years ago. And I said no, and I left home. And so you can't escape destiny. I really believe that now. And I'm so thankful that Mimi rescued the paintings when I had to urgently leave Tallahassee because of a dangerous situation that I encountered here. And so I got the privilege, and my grandmother's wish was granted, that I got to translate all of these things again. And, I cried when I heard the stories as a child, because there's so much human suffering. How could humans do these things to each other? And then I cried again every day for a year and a half as I was translating these works again. And every time when I was helping Kelly edit the boards and all of the displays that she so wonderfully put together, I cried again, and I cry every time. We keep track of what is happening with Mariupol now, with what is happening with Ukraine. I follow Telegram channels. I try to post about it and to keep it in the news, because Americans, unfortunately, and Europeans too, have a short attention span, and this is not the Kardashians. It's not, this stuff that's in the news now. It gets old, but it's vital because this is happening again, and this war is literally at Europe's doorstep. It's literally at our doorstep now, and these things are happening again and could happen to other countries too. So it's important that this story be told, and that every story from Mariupol be told, because not only is the Russification effort happening through selective education there, through revisionist history, they have destroyed every museum, they have destroyed every library, the educational institutions, and they have destroyed the archives that housed all of the vetting material for my grandmother's story. So I guess in conclusion, I want to thank everyone who made this possible, but especially I want to thank the Azovstal defenders who held Mariupol against insane odds, and they held that fortress, the bunkers, and that steel plant until they were ordered to lay down arms. Slava Ukraini!
Thank you. Thank you, Lucy. It is also an honor for me to introduce Major John Haynes, a highly decorated veteran of World War II, the Korean War, and the Vietnam War, serving for 30 years in the United States Marine Corps. What some people say reflexively, I say with all sincerity, thank you. He has worked tirelessly to help fellow veterans access benefits and other services since his retirement, and I want to get this number right, 47 years ago in 1975. I'm not a math person, but I'm assuming that's correct. 47, wow. Major John Haynes was awarded the National Society Daughters of the American Revolution Medal of Honor. This is the highest medal awarded by the DAR. I don't think there's anything more I can say. It's a pleasure. Please, Major John Haynes.
Good morning, everyone. I'm not sure that I can add a lot to what has already been said. Rocky, I want to congratulate you. I agree with every word that you spoke here this morning. But as an American citizen, yes, being a Marine for 30 years, we were taught a lot of things, but we were not taught to indiscriminately take other people's lives, dominate other people or dominate other races. Another thing we were not taught to rewrite history. And I think there's a lot of history that has been rewritten. I think we should tell the history the way it is. My heart goes out to the people in the Ukraine. And as an American citizen standing before you today, it troubles me, it bothers me that we have organizations like the United Nations, NATO, who I thought were organized to prevent these tragedies, and how we could sit with these world organizations today, who the United States is contributing millions and millions and millions of dollars to each year. Our tax money going to these elite organizations. But what are they doing to preserve human life, to preserve human dignity? You know, where are they? And I guess if I knew the answer to that question, I'd feel better this morning than what I do about our world situation. I guess it bothers me to stand before you today knowing that our government apparently isn't doing a lot about this to prevent these tragedies. Yes, we're providing some military aid to the Ukraine. I understand. But I think with all the money that we, the American citizens, are giving to these world organizations, I think that our government should demand an accounting. I think we should be on the front steps of the United Nations asking, what are you doing? And we're going to cut off all of our funding to you until you start producing to prevent these things. I don't know of any excuse why Russia should be allowed to dominate another country and just take over and pillage and kill, destroy their ability to create their own life, their own future, provide for their families, create the havoc and the misery that they're creating. It just bothers me as an American citizen. We are better than that. And I think that we must talk to our representatives in Washington and find out what they're doing to hold these organizations accountable. I could talk on this subject all day because it bothers me. Served in several wars to create peace, to achieve peace, and now to have these things happen. It makes me think that I maybe was wasting my time when I was doing these things for 30 years. I did serve for a short period of time with the British in Borneo. And Malaya and that part of the world back after World War II was sort of being devoured by the communists, and the British did something about it. And I happened to be one of the young exchange officers that we exchanged with the Brits, and I had the opportunity to go to Borneo with a British Gurkha unit and serve for a period of time, helping to stamp out communism. And believe it or not, the British were very successful in that part of the world doing it. And I know that I haven't this morning said a lot that probably means a lot to a lot of people, but the first time that I really became aware of this situation was I knew this young lady by the name of Mimi. And Mimi and I were heavily engaged working on some veterans projects and programs here in the Tallahassee area. And Mimi came to me one day and she was telling me about the Holocaust and about this whole situation. And that was really my first knowledge. I guess the fact that I skipped high school when I should have been going to high school instead of being a 15-year-old Marine. Maybe I would have learned some of this stuff, but I didn't. But Mimi taught me. But I knew that it was a worthwhile project to be working on if Mimi was involved, because Mimi is a fearless worker, as all of you probably know. She did so much in the veterans community for our veterans, not only helping the veterans locally, but throughout the state of Florida. And Mimi, I want to thank you for all the things that you brought to light that existed in some of our veterans' benefits, the inadequacies that was being produced by our Veterans Administration. But I want to tell you today, as I stand here, thanks mostly to the great work of Mimi, many of those situations have been corrected. Many of our veterans today are leading a better life as a result of the heroic acts and achievements and the stick-to-itiveness, the dogged attitude of Mimi. Once it's like a bulldog, once he gets that bone in his mouth, he's not going to turn it loose. That's Mimi. Mimi, thank you, and I appreciate the honor of being here today. Thank you so much.
All right. Timing was perfect on that, thank you. Because I get the pleasure, of course, of, well, I mean, do we even have to say her name? I mean, the reason every one of us is here is because somehow Mimi Shaw brought us all here. She's the catalyst that connected all of us together. She's a visionary, you know. She's brought this all together. Mimi is seen as the visionary of two regimes, but I believe that she's the visionary of so much more than that. Mimi was, and still is, an educator. She has taught in public and private schools for 22 years, and she continues her teaching passions with this. Mimi discovered this collection in 2000 in rural North Florida. Think about this. For 22 years, Mimi has been doggedly pursuing the visibility of this work and these words to educate, and that without rest, without stop. It's fascinating. I wish I could see inside her head, and yet that scares me. Obviously, Mimi has worked closely with Kelly Bowen with the goal to promote, preserve, and restore this collection. I would like to bring up Mimi to tell you about the newest two-regime venture, the newest, likely by far not the last, the musical drama Teodora.
You are not the only one that's scared about what's in my head. My husband, educator, Coach Perry Shaw, he worries every day about what's the next. Thank you all for coming. Thank you, Lucy and Jimmy, for coming from West Virginia. Thank you for coming from Miami, the Holodomor, the committee, U.S. Holodomor Committee, Oksana, Peter from Miami. Thank you for Svetlana and Nadia from our Ukrainian community here, and also thank you also Ms. Philemon for all your work in Ukraine right now. Thank you, Rocky, for being there for us, and Eric for listening to us call you. Kelly, thank you for being a partner all these years and recognizing the importance back from when I was teaching at McClay, and you were my best parent booster ever. Thank you for believing in this project. Thank you, Major Haynes. You are our hero. You are our hero throughout the state of Florida and the United States. Thank you for being here today, sir. Thank you to my husband and Diane and Deborah, who I'm going to speak about at this moment, and those two young interns back there, Justin and Becca. Thank you, Manuel, David. Thank you, everybody, for being here. Okay. I'm not done yet. All of my stuff has to be written down. I'm not off the cuff like that. This is my script. As we commemorate the lives of 3.9 million Ukrainian people that died in 1932-33 during Holodomor, we are reminded that the genocide of that time was a deliberate starvation of Ukrainian people at the hands of the Soviet Union. In the year 2000, the manuscript of Teodora Verbitskaya and the paintings of her daughter Nadia Verbitsky were discovered, vetted, and combined posthumously. The collection itself are the reflections of a family torn apart by two brutal, inhumane dictators, Stalin and Hitler. As teachers, upon discovery, we knew from the very beginning that this collection was an important resource for education. 3 legislative grants have been written in 3 separate years through the State of Florida Division of Cultural Affairs, the Foundation for Leon County Schools, and the Two Regimes Project for inclusion enrichment in history, literature, art, and theater classes for 5th through 12th grades. All content and format approved by the Florida Department of Education and CPOMS, thanks to Kelly Bowen. Results in the follow-up documentation of these Foundation for Leon County School grants before and after the study of Two Regimes Project in our schools proves that students were moved on a social, emotional level as they became more aware of what dictatorships, totalitarianism, oppression, and genocides are, and how it affects families, cultures, and societies around the world. But what can we do to provide increased awareness of Holodomor and Holocaust? Most people, you might ask, have never heard of this term and its meaning. I certainly hadn't. The answer is to educate our students and everyone, everywhere, about what happened in Ukraine in 1932 as history repeats itself right now. As educators, it involves the cognizance and the open-mindedness of creative thinkers to bring such a difficult topic to the forefront. We are honored to have educators who share that vision with us and to support and inspire, no matter how they may be silenced. We are grateful and appreciative of Superintendent Rocky Hanna of Leon County Schools and Eric Clark from the Foundation for Leon County Schools, who have been integral in the support and in the success of the implementation of the Two Regimes legislative grants in our classrooms under the careful creation and guidance of grant writer and curator Kelly Bowen of the Two Regimes Project. We also have here today Alicia Milicevic. Alicia, raise your hands. She is the History Department head of Godby High School, an innovative thinker who was able to incorporate interactive and creative methods of teaching the concepts of two regimes in her high school history classes in unique and interactive ways that we have not seen before. She brought her students up here, and those kids not only had studied a banner exhibition in their media center for weeks before they came here, but she had a scavenger hunt. And in that scavenger hunt, they were to find the answers to questions here by studying the art and studying the passages that they had talked about and discussed in their classrooms, but more importantly, that they were able to see, to read, and to feel as young adults. That rose this whole project to a level I can't even express to you. It was so moving. Alicia Milicevic also serves as the assistant director for Randy Lundgren of Godby High School, Teacher of the Year, by the way, who is the director of the musical drama Teodora, a musical production about the story of two regimes written by TCC Humanities professor and music educator Diane Dupuy Whitney. 2 of Diane's songs, A Question of Power and Hunger, will be sung for you this morning by FSU music performance graduate, educator, professional vocalist, and actress of well renown in this area, Deborah Brigman, who portrays the lead role of Theodora, who is Lucy's grandmother. It is also an honor here today to have Lucy Vanilar and Jimmy, the granddaughter of Theodora Verbitskaya, the author of Two Regimes, and the daughter of Nadia Verbitsky, the artist of the Two Regimes collection. I just want you to know that we were 20 years into this project when we got a phone call from this young lady in West Virginia who said, I have read the first edition of the book and I see what you're doing in education. What can I do? And we had no idea that there was any surviving family. So this is a miracle. The fact that they are here is a miracle. The fact that you are here, it's a miracle. And the work of Diane Whitney is absolutely, as you will hear, 2 of the 9 pieces that she's written. The debut of this musical will not only be a debut at Godby High School, it will be a template and a debut for a musical production that can be reproduced around the world. It is a unique, innovative, and inspiring way of teaching and internalizing for students the messages and the horror of what happened during Two Regimes. And I also want to thank my husband, who's been so tolerant all these years, who's been schlepping paintings everywhere. Thank you, Perry. At this time, I would like to introduce to you my dear friend of 40 years, who has written many musicals with me as a professional clown, Diane Dupuy Whitney, the author and composer of Theodora, who will speak to you about her work in the past 2 years and who will accompany Deborah Brigman in these amazing renditions.
A couple of decades ago, Mimi asked me to review a book. I didn't know anything about what was in the book, but when I finished it, there was a deep pain inside me of what this woman had gone through. As a mother of children, I had no idea how strong a woman could be if she needed to be. And now I'm involved in putting her story on the stage through song and drama. It's been an exciting journey, and I'm very appreciative of the opportunity to blend my interest in history and music together. And the person who is portraying Theodora is Debbie Brigman. She's going to sing 2 songs for you. I think they address issues that are with us today and probably will always be. One is hunger and one is power. The first song she's going to sing is Hunger, and the second song is A Question.
I have to cheat because this is very powerful. Diane's words and Diane's music are just incredible. And as a singer for most of my adult life, I can actually tell you it is very difficult to speak these words and know that this reality is happening now. I want you all to realize that we in this nation have an opportunity to plant a seed with our children, with the future of our nation. And this is perfect. So it is an honor for me to sing these songs. And thank you, Lucy. And thank you, Mimi. Everywhere there's hunger, up and down the street, empty, hollow faces, nothing to eat, people disappearing in the dead of night. No one's asking questions. How can this be right? Stand in line, get in the queue, that's what you do. Stand in line, don't push ahead, you'll get no bread. In the stores, the shelves are bare, nothing there to see. When I ask when they'll have more, they shake their head at me. Everywhere there's hunger, up and down the street. Everywhere there's hunger, hunger everywhere. The set of Theodora is at a shipyard. She is awaiting passage to Canada. It is 1948. She is anxious about getting on that boat. And one of the officials comes and starts asking her questions, and so she has an opportunity to reminisce about the last, 13, 14 years of what she's gone through with her children. And this next song, she's upset, because for all of those years, she has seen how narcissism and selfishness can literally control a country. And so one of the officials in charge starts asking her, well, you know, what's going on here? I mean, I don't really understand. Why didn't the officials, just like you, Major, said with our nation, why aren't we doing more? Why didn't we do more? And she looks at him and she says, the officials in charge were the ones with all the power, and it was all about power. It was a question of power, and in that dark hour, we could see it begin. Who would win, who would lose, who was out, who was in. It was a question of power. What kind of a man would take his soul and throw it away for the sake of control, destroying lives in numbers untold? Who could be so cold? It was a question of power, growing hour by hour. And we'd see it again, who would lose, who would win, who was out, who was in. It was a question of power. What kind of a man would take his soul and throw it away for the sake of control, destroying lives in numbers untold? Who could be so cold? It was a question of power.
Incredible. It's very moving. I don't know if that was a song about 1948 or now. Thank you.
Now you know.
Yeah. No, unfortunately, I still don't. Thank you. It's my pleasure to next introduce Oksana Piazetsky, who was born in the Western Ukraine and has since immigrated to the United States. Oksana was instrumental in winning public recognition of the Holodomor by former Massachusetts Governor Michael Dukakis. Living in Miami for 20 years, Oksana served as vice president of the Ukrainian American Club of Miami, was the coordinator for Chernobyl awareness and fundraising for the children of the Chernobyl Relief and Development Fund. She serves as the cultural chair of the Ukrainian Women's League of America, uniting Ukrainian culture programs throughout the United States. Oksana is currently on the executive committee of the Florida chapter of U.S. Committee for Ukrainian Holodomor Genocide Awareness. As chair of the subcommittee, Oksana is spearheading the Walter Duranty Revocation Campaign. Oksana, please.
Thank you very much. I am so happy to be here today to pay homage to such a wonderful, wonderful project, the two regimes. As a member of the Holodomor Committee, I was destined to meet up with these amazing women, Kelly Bowen and Mimi Shaw, to help in some way their difficult and multifaceted project. Today, you will hear from all of the participating actors in the project. Holodomor plays a very significant part in Theodora's and Nadia's story. They gave us this remarkable story, and our United States National Holodomor members continue their legacy by creating awareness in many ways. I would like to tell you about two very important projects of the U.S. Holodomor Committee. First, about the infamous Pulitzer Prize that was given to Walter Duranty. He was the official chronicler of the New York Times during the Joseph Stalin's reign. He received the highly coveted Journalism Prize in 1932 for his dispatches praising Stalin's collectivization. When Ukraine at that time was undergoing a horrific genocide in a forced famine called the Holodomor, or killing by hunger. Duranty denied that there was a famine. As a tool of Stalin's propaganda, he encouraged our president, Franklin Roosevelt, to do business with Stalin and to bring the Soviet Union into the world arena and into the League of Nations, while 7 to 10 million people were dying in a forced famine. The Ukrainian diaspora has petitioned the New York Times and the Pulitzer Board to revoke Duranty's prize for decades, but they refuse. We now have a petition on change.org where we are asking for revocation with signatures. And we are asking all of you to participate and put your signature on this site, because the greater impact we have with signatures, maybe we can finally get this done. The second major project of our committee is to get all of the United States to proclaim that Holodomor was a genocide. And this has not been an easy task. So far, we have 22 states. In Florida, I have tried for 3 years to get this proclamation from our governor, to no avail. And just recently, again, I was denied. I am urging all of you, you do not have to be of Ukrainian heritage, to do your best to convince our governor that he should sign a proclamation in this state. After looking at this fabulous project, the two regimes, there is no reason why in Florida we should not have this proclamation. And as you have said, Lucy, this is the second genocide that we're going through in Ukraine. And someone recently, Professor Motel, said that this is a Holodomor, just with replacing one letter there, the K, that we starved the people in the first genocide, and we are freezing people now in the second genocide. So I thank you very much for allowing me to tell you at least two of the projects which are furthering the cause of the two regimes. Thank you very much.
Oksana, may I ask, how can we access this petition?
It is, I can give you information because I have printed little leaflets that
Wonderful.
I can give out to you.
Thank you. Thank you. Wow. I would like to introduce next Michael Saukiv, who's a former president of the Ukrainian Congress Committee of America, the leading representative organization of the Ukrainian American community. Since 1996, man, there's a lot of years in this room. This is amazing. Again, I'm not so great at math. I was not a product of the Leon County School District, so my math is questionable, but that's a long time. Since 1996, he has served as director of the UCCA's Washington, D.C. Bureau, the Ukrainian National Information Service, the Ukrainian Community Advocacy Arm in Washington, D.C. Michael is also chairperson of the U.S. Committee for Ukrainian Holodomor Genocide Awareness, and was instrumental in the establishment of the Ukrainian Famine Genocide Memorial in Washington, D.C., the Holodomor Memorial, unveiled in November 2015. In August 2017 and September 2021, Michael was awarded by the past president of the Ukraine the Yaroslav the Wise State Medal for his advocacy work in Washington and the establishment of the Holodomor Memorial. Please, it was a pleasure and an honor to meet you.
David, I was a math major in college, so I'll help you out with any of the math that you need. Rabbi, the team at Two Regimes, Lucy, honored guests. To defeat the enemy, only one solution was possible. They would have to be starved out. The preceding statement describes a conclusion about the Ukrainian famine genocide, or Holodomor, from the Black Book of Communism, a book that illuminated the horrors of communist tyranny worldwide. For decades in Ukraine, the Holodomor, Stalin's genocide that, through documented archival research and witness testimonies, took the lives of between 7 to 10 million Ukrainians by starvation in the years of 1932-33, but was only spoken in whispers, if at all. There was little or no mention of the Holodomor in newspapers of the time, of history books, or even of memoirs. So how did the Soviet Union accomplish this genocidal cover-up? By using the communication channels of the era, they created fake news. Now imagine, if you would, the greater Tampa and Miami metropolitan areas, a population of approximately 8.5 to 9 million people, according to the 2020 census, vanishing in 18 months without the world knowing, acknowledging, or even caring. Unfathomable would be the immediate reaction of any human being wrought with a conscience and a love for mankind. But that was the reality of Ukraine in 1932 and 1933. Slowly, and in measured steps, knowledge of the Holodomor has begun to disseminate throughout the world. The term itself, Holodomor, has now become a part of the American, if not world, lexicon. And since 2015, as mentioned by David, thousands of tourists and passersby are now made aware of Stalin's crime against humanity by visiting the Holodomor Memorial on federal land in Washington, D.C. Incidentally enough, today, the memorial was dedicated on this day, November 7th of 2015, with thousands of people in attendance. But one of the greatest and biggest challenges facing greater awareness and genocide recognition of the Ukrainian Holodomor are the evil acts of Russian disinformation. Massive resistance and denial of the Holodomor were commonplace during Soviet times. Even a phrase in the 2017 major motion film about the Holodomor called Bitter Harvest summarized Moscow's intent then and especially now. Reality is the enemy. But our understanding of that stark reality is made all the more clear in viewing this exhibition that depicts the Holodomor. We are immeasurably thankful to the two regimes, to the Florida government agencies for hosting and arranging these wonderful lessons of the Holodomor, to the school districts for bringing the children here to view this exhibit. For as the old adage says, a picture is worth 1,000 words. Thus, we create a visual stimulus for everybody to understand the realities of the Holodomor. But this event and this exhibition underscores that the remembrance of Holodomor is not, however, simply a Ukrainian issue. This is a worldwide issue. It is an American issue. The recent proclamation of the Holodomor as genocide by nearly 25 states, as my predecessor Oksana had mentioned, evoke recognition of the highest of calibers, that being morality and truth. Therefore, we do call upon the governor's office here in Tallahassee to do the same and to recognize the Holodomor as genocide. It is sad that the world has not yet learned the cruel lessons of the Ukrainian genocide of 1932-33. Food continues to be used as a political tool in the world today. Fast forward from the Holodomor 89 years into the future, into this commemorative month of November of 2022, and realize that the irony of food is once again used as a weapon in today's stark, dim, violent reality of the Kremlin's unprovoked and detested war in Ukraine. Recently, last week, the Minister of Foreign Affairs of Ukraine evoked the title of a very popular movie series entitled The Hunger Games to describe the Kremlin's callous disregard for food security worldwide as Russia threatens to not comply with the UN-negotiated grain export deal from Ukraine. How ironic that a foreign oppressor in Moscow has and is subjugating the country of Ukraine, the land of plenty with its rich black soil, to acts of terror forcibly confiscating or denying the free transport of foodstuffs solely based on hatred of ethnicity and, frankly speaking, for being Ukrainian. That chilling sentiment defines the 10 stages of genocide in all of its attributes. 1, classification. 2, symbolization. 3, discrimination. 4, dehumanization. 5, organization. 6, polarization. 7, preparation. 8, persecution. 9, extermination. And 10, denial. Thus, apathy and ignorance of history will ensure that the mistakes of the past will be repeated. It is not enough, however, to speak of genocide and famine in the abstract. Today, we are witnesses to another genocide transpiring in front of our own eyes in Ukraine once again. We must cite these very specific events, such as the Holodomor and the current war in Ukraine, to put a human face on such crimes. To do otherwise is to dismiss the murder of millions as a mere statistic. As we commence a year-long series of events to commemorate the 90th anniversary of the Holodomor, we compare the tragedy of senseless violence in Ukraine and proclaim our everlasting theme as being clear. Holodomor then, genocide now, justice when. The historical justice of officially recognizing the Holodomor as a genocide is precisely as important as the justice that awaits today's Russian war criminals in Ukraine. To conclude, let us pledge to one another that we will always recall the victims of the Ukrainian Holodomor and their incredible sacrifice, as well as to thank those who continue to bring this tragic episode of man's inhumanity to man to the attention of the world. For theirs is a noble and a righteous path. Thank you for your attention.
Thank you. Next, I'd like to introduce you to Teresa Fellman, the director of His Kids Too. Teresa has a ministry that has grown from providing clothing to local people to serving people in 9 developing countries, in addition to children and adults in the United States. The purpose has always been the same: to provide clothing and household goods free to anyone in need. Ukraine has been the primary focus of His Kids Too since 1998. In 2000, His Kids Too became a 501c3 charity, and in 2005 became a recognized charity in the Ukraine. Teresa?
Trying to put a name and a face. So I brought this along that I took when our town in Ukraine, eastern Ukraine, was taken by the Russians. This is one of the things they left behind when they were shooting at the Ukrainians, trying to take us back again. But Russians were in our territory, and so this is just an example. And there was thousands of these on the streets, so we could pick them up, and I decided to bring home some. So thank you for the opportunity to speak to you today. I am the director of His Kids Too, and a charity that's been working in Ukraine since 1994. Presently, I can't be in Ukraine. We live in eastern Ukraine, which is in the Donbass area. You might have heard of that on TV. And due to the aggressive, illegal Russian invasion, we can't be there right now. We have a community center there for our community, but it's presently vacated. Presently, our town has been, what's the word? We've been taken by Russia. And so now we are Russian territory. We were forced to flee about June, July, and now all of our work is done in central Ukraine. What I'm going to talk to you about today is bringing Ukrainians to the United States. That's what I've been asked to speak about, and how to do that. I didn't really think about it until I mentioned it to you, and you said, I want more information. And I thought about it, but you really are interested in finding out how to do this, because it is a difficult process, but it's not insurmountable. During the 22 years that we've been living on and off in Ukraine, of course, we made lots of friends. I mean, literally hundreds of friends. We were there large times. We were there 4 or 5 months at a time. Then we'd come back to the United States, raise money, go back for several months. So we had a lot of friends. So when this invasion happened in 2014, we were like, what are you going to do? Well, we're going to stay here. People wanted to stay there. But it made it very difficult, because a lot of people didn't realize that even though things looked very good, Russia was just indiscriminately shooting at us in eastern Ukraine. Everything was going on as normal in Kiev, but here we were in eastern Ukraine. And during that time, during the last several years, over 14,000 civilians have been killed. People didn't realize that. because they're nameless, faceless people, but they weren't to me. Some of those were my friends. And so when the full invasion came on in February 24th of 22, we knew then that we had to strongly encourage our friends to consider evacuating and leaving Ukraine. But we couldn't figure out really how to go about doing that because it is a lot of paperwork. In the past, we have brought 4 other people to Ukraine under medical visas and student visas. That seemed really quite obvious, but there really wasn't a visa for this situation. And so we tried a number of things, but that didn't work. And when President Biden formulated the Uniting for Ukraine program, we jumped at the opportunity because we were like, this is going to be our way to help so that our friends could reestablish their lives. When we called and talked to them about it, they were quite shocked that we would even consider such a thing. But we said, yes, we want to do this, and there's a lot of paperwork involved. And they said, okay. And it all sounds really nice to do that, but you've got to remember what these people have lived through. And so when you bring refugees, whoever that is, whether they're Ukrainian or people from Afghanistan, there's a lot of things to consider because they see America as being a place that we all have super nice houses and drive sports cars and live on vacation. And that's not the way it is at all. And especially with refugees, because they've lived through a lot of very, very, very difficult situations that probably only literally a handful of people in this room have ever experienced. Being shot at, you understand that and the trauma that invokes in your life. One of the biggest factors about bringing people to the United States is the first factor is the cost. But there's ways around that. Our organization actually was able to underwrite the funding on bringing our first family. We brought a 3-generational family here in June. So we brought the grandparents, the parents, and then they have a child. So we're hopefully going to help them reestablish their lives and help 3 generations survive. So the first factor is the cost. But then when you're also looking at factors of bringing foreigners here, you want to know, do they speak English? Very difficult to learn the language. What is their educational level? When you're bringing someone here, you have to consider what are you going to offer them and what are they going to be able to offer the United States? And that's one of the things the government looks at also. What is their motivation for coming? In this situation, it was to flee a very bad situation. And so Uniting for Ukraine is specifically for refugees that are fleeing the Russian aggression. And so that was an easy thing to do. What is their health status? Are you prepared to take on the finances of providing health care for someone? They've been through a lot of trauma, and mental health care is very, very important, but very difficult to find here. That has been probably one of our struggles, is finding Ukrainian-speaking mental health workers. And they probably have the same situation with people from Afghanistan. But these people have had a lot of trauma in their lives. So they have to talk to somebody to get through it. And I actually would love to see people who have been there and lived through it, and they come here, and because you can't experience it. If you're just a regular mental health worker in the United States that have never experienced any trauma, there's totally different trauma of being shot at. I've been shot at. I've been in Ukraine and been shot at. So I know what that's like, and I know the post-traumatic stress that a person has. We need mental health workers. So that is a need that we have. And if anybody knows Ukrainian-speaking mental health workers, please touch base with me later on. But to bring a family here, I don't want to make it sound like it's completely insurmountable. And as I was telling Lucy, she was like, I really want this information, so I'm going to give it to you. So the first thing you have to do is you have to fill out the USCIS forms of the I-134. Take you several hours to do it, but you have to disclose all your financial information on that form. They want everything. U.S. government wants to know everything. So when we filled that out, we said, oh, this is going to take weeks, maybe months to get it the approvals. We thought we had a lot of time to get everything planned, and it took 48 hours. And we got our I-94 travel documents for our family. It was wonderful, but we weren't quite ready yet. So one of the things that we did, which I want to encourage anybody who might say this is a huge ordeal, is we did something called circle sponsorship. It sounds kind of strange. I don't know if anybody's ever heard of it, but envision a circle cut into pie shapes. And each piece of pie represents a facet of this person's life that you're going to help them to get reestablished in the United States. So the pieces of the pie could be anywhere from housing. Okay, so you get them a place to live, you got to furnish it. Furnishings, utilities, cable for internet, cell phones. You have to literally reinvent someone's life, recreate someone's life in the United States. Then another piece of the pie is transportation. Another piece is dental, medical needs, clothing. If they have children, they've got to get immunizations, get them in school. There's a lot of paperwork just to process, but it's not insurmountable when you have a team of people, because each team takes a piece of the pie and works on. I've got people right now, I'm leaving Thursday, just to let you know, I'm leaving Thursday to go get another family. Bringing another family of 5 to the United States that have escaped eastern Ukraine. Their house is no more, their farm is no more, it's gone. So I'm leaving to pick them up, and right now, as we speak, somebody asked me, where was I last week? Why wasn't I at the pre-performance, so to speak? Because I was sitting at the house that we're renting for these folks over in Eastgate, and I had 3 truckloads of furniture that was given to me by the wonderful Tallahassee community. And so I've been sitting over there getting their house rearranged. I was getting their cable television set up, or actually not so much TV, but more internet, so they can communicate with their people in Ukraine. So there's a lot of things going on behind the scenes that you don't always know. But it's not insurmountable. It's doable. I'm more than willing to help somebody if they want the directions on doing it. One of the huge misconceptions is that immigrants can come here and immediately go to work. How many people think, yeah, they're just going to come here and go to work, going to go work at McDonald's or whatever? You cannot do that. Please understand that when you see people standing at the corners begging for money, I don't think they should be doing that either. They need to talk to their sponsor and say, please, I need some money for this or that or the other thing. To be able to work in the United States, they have to have an employment identification document. And that takes anywhere from USCIS, so candidly told us, 3 weeks to 9 months. And during that time, you cannot legally work. So all the person's care falls on the sponsor's shoulder. So just remember that's, and there's no way to speed that up. So in conclusion, I do want to say that we do need help with emotional support. The refugees need help with emotional support. They need encouragement, a listening ear, and if you can't do it, you have to find somebody that can, because they've got to have that. For us, we are so thankful that we've had the opportunity to help the refugees come here. It's an honor and a privilege to help them, and we're just glad that we're able to do this. So, thank you.
Wonderful. Thank you. And let's talk a little bit after this. Our art therapy program is currently working with some Ukrainian art therapists and people all over the country to work on this. So this is wonderful. Thank you. Let's chat. Absolutely. I'm very honored and thrilled to announce that the remaining 5 people are indeed residents and refugees and came over from the Ukraine, and I think this is extremely important and valuable for us. It provides more than just statistics, provides a face, provides a story. To begin with, I'd like to introduce Leonid Makarov, who arrived in Tallahassee in June 2022 with his wife, their little son, and his parents. Before the war, Leonid lived in the Donbass region in the city of Toretsk. I would point to the map. Unfortunately, I don't know where that area is. It's right over there. It's right over there. Thank you. Leonid, it would be wonderful if you can show us. Leonid holds a master's degree in religious studies from Donetsk National Technical University. Let me introduce Leonid, please. Thank you. You'll show me the map later.
Okay. No, I'll show you right now. Thank you. Okay, it's actually right here, the city where I'm from. So we, as been said, moved here this year in June with Mrs. Philman's help, and I'm very honored to be here today on this event. It's a big honor for me, and thank you for inviting me. This story of Holodomor, it's also, I think it's no need to say, it's a family story of like my family too, because my grandmother, she was starving when she was born in 1933, and her aunt, she was like hiding a Jew boy in her cellar. But on February 24th, when I woke up in my flat here and I heard the sound of shelling, it became my story. And now we have a third regime, and it was very right emphasized that this is another genocide is being committed right now in Ukraine. It's because it's not just like a war. As you can imagine, it's a constant attack on civilian objects, killing civilians. It's simply really and truly dangerous to be Ukrainian in Ukraine. It's dangerous to keep this blue and yellow flag in your house. And I just want to thank you everybody for supporting us and for supporting like my country. So what I want to say that why is this happening? Those crimes which were committed 80 years ago, they were not condemned enough. They were not like punished. And that's why it's happening again. And many people say that history repeats itself, or it's like a wheel. It is not history which repeats itself. It's people who repeat its evil deed. And they do it because they are allowed to, because they get away with that 80 years ago. Soviet Union is like a member of United Nations Security Council, and after doing that, and as a result, we have this tragedy now. So my message to you is we have to fight for freedom. We have to fight for food. We have to fight for prosperity, for normal life. And we need to keep fighting. And thank you for supporting us, supporting my country in this fight, in this struggle. Thank you, everybody, for your attention very much.
Next, I would like to introduce you to Nadia Ozerova, who was born and raised in the Ukrainian city of Berdyansk, a seaport at the Azov Sea. She holds a master's degree in Ukrainian language, literature, and folklore from Taras Shevchenko University in Kyiv.
Thank you, Dr. Husak. Thank you. As you heard, I got a degree in Ukrainian language, so English is not so good. That's why I have to read some. So good morning, everyone. Thank you for inviting me here. My name is Nadia Ozerova, and I was born in Berdyansk town on the Azov seashore. It's right here. There is an interesting monument in my hometown that causes a smile only among the guests of the town, but not among the locals. That is a monument to a small fish, bычок, or gobidi in English, which is known to all connoisseurs of local sea delicacies. In difficult times for town residents, catching these fish literally meant salvation. Fish pancakes. Sounds funny, doesn't it? If you pictured crab cakes in your imagination, that is not this recipe. Those pancakes had only one ingredient: fish. Gobidi or European anchovy. No flour, no eggs, no veggies. Everything was taken away. My grandmother was a child those days. She didn't like to talk about famine. Actually, nobody was even allowed to discuss those themes. She told me once, "You have bread, so eat it." In my childhood, we were arrested if somebody found out that I took ears of wheat for my family from the empty field, even as few as 5 of them. That's why we have these 5 ears of wheat here. My grandma didn't like to eat red beet, and I could not understand why, because we have a lot of recipes in Ukrainian cuisine with this vegetable. Only years later, my mom told me that during famine, grandma's family could only find in their garden frozen beet, so this taste brought not the best memories to her mind. Here in Tallahassee, I work as a teacher assistant and math teacher, and making connection through the years, I want to share with you memories of 2 math teachers. Just imagine, 9 years old Anna was starving in Berdansk in 1933. She was rescued by her math teacher Kost Zinkivsky, that one who taught his students his famous mental math technique. Zinkivsky arranged for Anna to receive a cup of milk every day. Maybe that was milk for the teacher's family that he gave to her. We will never know. Anna had only water, salt, and fish at home. Salt they got from the salt lakes near the town. She remembered for her entire life the terrible picture of tragic lines swollen with hunger villages through the eastern avenue of Berdansk to the sea, to the saving fish soup. It was the early spring, and snow just melted. Villagers were walking, women, men, old people, kids. They walked close to each other, absolutely silent, with a last strength. They walked from other parts of Ukraine, walked because NKVD did not allow starving villagers use railroads. She did not remember exactly the year, 1931, 1932, but it was not in 1933, the year of big famine, Holodomor. In that year, villagers were not allowed to leave their village. My grandma's village, Dmitrivka, was on the blackboard. This is right next to Berdansk. Blackboard, it means collective farm there did not meet grain quotas, did not give enough to the Moscow regime, and this village's property was subject to arrest, and their territory was forcibly cordoned off by the OGPU secret policy. Nothing in, nobody out. So no grocery goods, even soap or matches. And you can understand now why my grandma always convinced us to have at home a lot of extra packs of matches, salt, and soap. Another math teacher, Maria, from the same village, from Dmitrivka, told, "I was a child. I remember how Mom came home and said sometimes, 'In those houses, everybody lie down, all dead. In those, some are breathing yet.' We were rescued by the fish. The soap was fish and goose food, the weeds. People who were appointed by the Communist Party to the administration came to houses with a weapon and took away everything, wheat, oil. Right now, the city of Berdansk is occupied by Russian troops. At the beginning of June 2022, the Russian invaders sent the first train with stolen Ukrainian grain from the occupied regions near to my hometown. And at the end of this June, they organized the first shipment of grain that was grain by sea from Berdansk. Also, significant consignments of grain are transported by motor vehicles. 2 weeks ago, just 2 weeks, Russian troops and so-called administration of Berdansk, appointed by Russian occupiers, intensified the export of grain by rail. Like 90 years ago, grain is taken away. Same idea, same direction. We trust and support Ukrainian defenders who these days and these minutes are doing everything to free my hometown. But world has to hear us, and we have to be loud. In math terms, sum of education, what you're doing here, and awareness equal our future.
Thank you. Svitlana Yaroshinsky moved to Tallahassee from Ukraine in 2009. She is a professional translator after receiving a PhD in communication from Florida State University. Svitlana also teaches and continues to teach at FSU as a part-time faculty member. So that is definitely a wonderful thing for Florida State. Thank you.
Good morning, everyone. Thank you for inviting us to this event. My name is Svitlana Yaroshinsky, like I said, and it's really hard to show on the map where in Ukraine I'm from, because I grew up in the Crimea, right here. Then I went to school and college and lived for 12 years in the Donbas region, so I'm well familiar with this part of the world, so right here in Horlivka. But a few years later, after I got married, I had my son, we moved to Khmelnytsky region. This is the western part of Ukraine. So right here, there you go. Small town of Neteshin. So today I will go in to speak about this part of Ukraine, the city of Neteshin. Because this is the part where my sons grew up. This is the place where their family still lives, and this is the place where my colleagues and true friends are fighting to live through the war. So in the 1930s, Neteshin was a small village right on the border with Poland. What happened in 1921, after a war, Poland and Ukraine set up a border just a few miles, literally a couple of miles from Neteshin in Vilbivno. And in 1921, when the Communist Party started to force people to give up their property and cattle and create collective farms instead of private farms. So those who resisted were sent to Siberia, all the way to the east to Siberia. So in the 1930s, in a small town, in a small village actually of Neteshin, 200 people were sent to Siberia. And residents of the village, along with other residents of Western Ukraine, were resistant. They were taking part in multiple uprisings against the communist policies. And there is an area in the local museum, in the local history museum, that dedicated to the Holodomor times. And those exhibits demonstrate that all the speculations that the Great Famine of the 1932 and 1933 in Ukraine was caused by bad weather were far from the truth. Well, what the exhibition says, they said that in 1932, when Ukrainian villages were already dying of starvation, 1.72 million tons of grain were exported abroad by the Soviet Union. And in 1933, it was a little less, but still 1.78 tons of grain. What it means that if in a year, a regular person consumes about 150 kilos or 330 pounds of grain, according to some online sources, then this amount would feed 11 million people. And by estimates, 5 to 8 million people died across the Soviet Union. That does not include Ukraine, but other regions that were hit by famine as well. So the Soviet Union was buying heavy machinery in exchange for the grain. They literally stole from their citizens. And they were killing in this way two birds with one stone. On the one hand, they were building this heavy military industry, and they were eliminating stubborn Ukrainian farmers. So another proof that bad weather was not the true reason for the hunger death, Ukrainians who lived across the border, just a couple miles away from Neteshin, did not experience famine. And so they were getting news about the great hunger from their relatives, from their friends that lives a few miles away across the border with Ukraine, and from a few who were fortunate enough to cross the border into Poland. And for many in Neteshin, that closeness of the border was literally a blessing, because they were smuggling things into Ukraine. They were smuggling food, they were smuggling tea, matches, bread, anything they could. But even still, in a small village of Neteshin, 66 people died of Holodomor. Again, just a couple of miles away from Poland where no famine was experienced. So a few days ago, I called my friend in Neteshin to ask her family about the history, about her family history. And then we could not speak for too long because they're now experiencing frequent outages, blackouts because of the Russia's shelling. and they save energy and get ready for a long and cold winter. But she actually was optimistic, and she said, "We will survive. It is more important to help our soldiers and to win the war as soon as we can. And Ukraine will survive, just like it did 90 years ago, because they cannot kill Ukrainian soul and Ukrainian spirit." Thank you.
Thank you, Dr. Yaroshinsky. I'd now like to introduce Maria Solinik. Sorry, I apologize. Sorry. Thank you. Maria came to Tallahassee in 2012 with her parents and younger brother from Kyiv, the capital of Ukraine. She is currently an 11th grade student in Florida High School. Thank you so much for joining us, please.
Okay. Hello, everyone, people from Tallahassee and people that come from afar. My name is Maria Solyanik, a proud Ukrainian-born girl that has come to give you some insight to the injustices and terrors that the Ukrainian people have suffered at the hands of a few powerful people. Before writing this speech, I only had a vague idea about my Ukrainian heritage that has such rich history. It was my mother who brought my attention to a famine, which was named Holodomor by the Ukrainian people, Holod meaning hunger, and Mor meaning extermination, which was very fitting considering what the Ukrainian population went through. It was an outrage, a dark moment in the world's history. The victims of Holodomor consisted of rural farmers and villagers, who made up roughly 80% of Ukraine's population in the 1930s. My great-grandmother, Yefrosinya, and her husband Ivan were simple farmers from Spassky village in the Melitopol district. Their lives consisted of tending to livestock and caring for their 4 children, Maria, Pasha, Leonid, and Mikhail. Though conditions weren't the best, they remained humble. They tended to their 1 cow and horse that lived on their farm. But all of this unfortunately changed when Soviet authorities confiscated their livestock as part of a collectivization campaign. They were left with no resources, no food, and as a result, my great-grandparents and their son Mikhailo were starved to death, along with thousands of other victims from their region. May we forever remember the precious lives that we lost in 1932 to 1933. Thankfully, my great-grandmother Pasha battled those odds as she was sent to live with her aunt in Kerch, Crimea, a region that was not severely affected by the famine. I will forever be grateful that she was able to survive, so I will be born to tell others the story of the horrors and injustices that happened at the hand of Soviet forces. Some historians believe that the famine was implemented by the dictator Joseph Stalin in an effort to eliminate any traces of a Ukrainian independence movement. Others suggest that rapid Soviet industrialization and collectivization of agriculture might be to blame. Either way, all historians universally agree that the cause for Holodomor was man-made, though some dispute whether it was truly a genocide. Well, let me tell you that deciding whether this stain in history should be considered a genocide is not up to question for me. Holodomor reflects the main definition of a genocide, which is the deliberate killing of a large number of people from a particular nation or ethnic group, with the aim of destroying that nation or group. Tell me, should the suffering and direct extermination of the Ukrainian people, especially when a tactic such as mass starvation was used, be cast away as a minor inconvenience? Why should their suffering not be recognized? The children they lost, the parents that took their last dying breath, only praying that their babies might have a tiny crumb or 2 to eat. Are we to just forget their efforts to survive in a world so cruel? Even if Stalin had not originally planned Holodomor as a genocide, he knew that the resulting famine was imminent because of his policy of collectivization and industrialization. He could have prevented Holodomor, but he chose to prioritize Soviet interests instead, rather than feeding the starving, thus consciously abetting it. Today, the descendants of those responsible for Holodomor are trying to hide the evidence of their crime and have another attempt at eliminating Ukrainians as a nation. In February of 2022, Putin's troops invaded and occupied parts of southern and eastern Ukraine. One of the first things that the Russian invaders did was destroy any evidence of Holodomor from local archives and libraries. This is exactly what happened in the Melitopol district region, the home of my great-grandparents. Putin's genocidal plan involves a systemic depopulation and ethnic cleansing of occupied regions. Many Ukrainian towns have been reduced to rubble, thousands of civilians killed, millions left their homes, and more than 1 million Ukrainians have been forcibly deported to Russia. Even now, Putin uses starvation as a weapon to achieve his goals in Ukraine by means of limiting supplies of Ukrainian wheat to nations such as Africa or other nations affected by food insecurity. If we do not stop Putin, future generations will struggle to comprehend why the democratic world let it happen in the first place. Thank you for your attention. I would also like to show a picture of my great-grandparents. That's them too, and that's their daughter, Maria. So, Slava Ukraini!
Thank you so much, Maria. Wow. Our final speaker is Maria Malay. Maria was born and raised in Mariupol, Ukraine. Maria and her mother came to Tallahassee in July 2022, fleeing from the Russian aggression. An architect by education, Maria is a professional web designer and photographer, and I believe her story will be told by Valeria Petushkova. Maria will be doing, so this is wrong then. All right, great. Thank you.
Good morning, everyone. My name is Maria Malay, and today I want to share the story of my family with you.
Into the microphone.
Is it better? Голосніше? Я можу казати просто голосніше. Ні? Sorry. I was born in Mariupol, Ukraine. It's right there. And it's a beautiful city by the sea. I grew up and finished school there. Me, my younger sister, parents, my grandparents grew up and lived in Mariupol all their lives too. I used to spend a lot of time with my grandmother and my great-grandparents in childhood. I often came to their village, which was near to my city, and sometimes they were telling me about their lives. It was really interesting for me to explore the history of my family, and I like listening to them because I saw a lot of differences between their childhood and mine. I clearly remember that strange feeling when they were telling me about Holodomor and the war, and that they didn't have anything to eat. I couldn't even imagine what they went through. I used to hear about it from my great-grandma and read in books, but I would never have thought that I'd know what war is until 2022. When Holodomor started, my great-grandmother, Nadezhda, was 4 years old. She lived with her parents and siblings. There were 7 children in the family. They lived in a small village in Zaporizhia region. Her father worked as a foreman. The government formed by Communist Party started to force people to give up their property and cattle. People began to starve. Everything was taken from my family: groceries, grain, livestock, even a sewing machine. Those who tried to hide something were imprisoned or killed. People ate everything they could find: grain, sprouts, grass, branches. Everyone tried to survive. One day, some people stole grain that my great-grandmother's father was responsible for. He was sent to prison, from which he didn't return. His wife was left alone with the children. 2 of them died of starvation. When this year the war started, I couldn't believe it. I always thought that People knowing the horrors of the Holodomor and the war would wish for peace, but no. My parents and grandmother were in Mariupol when it started. My sister was there, a lot of my friends were there too. My family spent a month under bombing and air raids with no electricity, no gas, no heat, no water, without cell service in March. Temperature in March in Mariupol fluctuates between 31 and 41 degrees Fahrenheit. They were melting snow to get at least some water. The city was blocked. No one could help them. They were isolated and just hoping to survive. Our neighbor burned alive because a shell hit his house. One of my friends died, and we can find the body. Relatives of my friends and acquaintances are dead too. Thousands of people were killed. The city was totally destroyed. For what? Thank you.
Thank you, Maria. Very powerful message, very powerful story. We have about 20 minutes, and I've been asked to essentially moderate a question and answer period. This was our final speaker. I can't tell you what an honor it has been to be amongst all of you and to be able to be up here and to hear all of the stories and to be a part of this event. Thank you. It has been truly an honor. Are there any questions that we would like to pose to any of our speakers, to any of the moderators, the curators?
I just want to add, because I forgot to say, that the mini exhibit of the two regimes that I know of are going to be shown in in Miami at the Museum of History, so that is forthcoming. And so these mini exhibits are going to be very important in sharing them with the world. And the other one is in Minnesota, I believe.
We have 3 mini exhibitions that, through the funding of CIUS and HREC, provided 3 framed text board exhibitions to go around the country. One is in Washington, D.C., one went to South Florida, and one went to Texas. The one in Texas has already been exhibited in the city of Bandera, and it will be in Austin, it will be in Houston, it will, I think it will be at the Holocaust Museum down there as well, and it will then go to Rochester, New York, and Syracuse, New York. I think it's also at the University, St. Mary's University in Texas as well. So because this is the commemorative year of the Holodomor, the 90th commemorative year of the Holodomor, from November this year all the way through next year, these mini exhibitions that basically would have the picture and the text to tell a little bit of the story, plus they have the 2 policy boards of the Holodomor and the Holocaust to educate people around the country about what had happened.
Don't go anywhere.
Right here.
I think we are winding this down. I do want to take, again, a moment to say what an honor it has been to stand before all of you, to meet all of you, to see some of you again, and to be able to connect. And what an amazing event. I'd like to go ahead and introduce one final song, I believe is the Ukrainian song. Is it Shovona Kalina? Was that close?
Very close.
Thank you. I'm validated. Let's do this right. And this will be our concluding event. Thank you.
My pleasure. Are you kidding? I need that.
No,
We need, no, you're the dance. No, okay. Okay, you start.
Ой, у лузі червона калина похилилася, чогось наша славна Україна зажурилася, а ми тую червону калину підіймемо, а ми нашу славну Україну, гей, гей, розвеселимо. Лузі червона калина похилилася, чогось наша славна Україна зажурилася.